In 15 minutes, I'm going to teach you everything I've learned in over 10 years of playing chess about the Caro-Kann fantasy variation. You'll be entertained, you'll have a slightly bigger brain, and most importantly, you will gain some chess elo, which I know you need. So why do we play this opening? The point is, we can play the classical with knight c3, that's the option we have. They take, we take, but your opponent really knows this line, the same way with the advanced variation. We can play the advance, but they know this pretty well. Now that's the point of the fantasy variation. We're trying to throw off our opponent at the very start of the game. And they can go wrong very quickly. So we're going to start off with some inaccuracies with moves the opponent really doesn't play. One such move is queen a5 check, and this is pretty bad. We just respond with either knight c3, I like knight c3 here, even c3 is fine. And after they play a move like knight f6, we just push the knight in. So we always play this e5 move to push this knight away, and once the knight goes back to d7, we follow up with f4. f4 creates this strong bind with f4, e5, and d4 pawns, and soon we're going to play the move bishop d2, kick this queen away, since if they don't move the queen, if they play a move like a6, this discovery can get really dangerous in certain positions. Here, not so much, bishop d3, develop, bishop e7, you can already play queen g4, and this queen is just completely misplaced. So that's not going to suit them. Another move is c5. c5 makes little sense here. We simply take dc5. dc5 is the move we play, and this is a free pawn. If they play the move e6, we play bishop e3, defending the pawn, very simply. And now if they play a move like knight f6, we just develop, nothing's going on here. And if they take, so that if they ever make the mistake of taking, we trade the queen, they take with the king, and here we already take this with the knight. Now, what's happening in this position? We're up a pawn. We have a solid advantage of a pawn. Their bishop is stuck in. Their king can't castle. We're about to queenside castle and give him a check. So this is already a terrible position for the black pieces. That's why they never really play c5. Now, what do we do against e5? e5 is a move that they have, and against e5, we simply play d5. Make sure not to play a move like ed5, because here the pawn on f3 stands really bad, and we always want the pawn on f3 to recapture on e4. So we play de5. Now, typically they make two moves. If they play a move such as taking, this would be a mistake because we can simply trade the queens. And what's going on in this position? You trade the queens and you play knight c3. Now, it may look on the surface, okay, it's equal material, but this position is far from equal. Why is it far from equal? Let's say they play a move like bishop e6. Now simply knight d4 comes, we're attacking the bishop, and this bishop has no good prospects. Let's say the bishop comes back, because if they allow us to capture, we'll simply take the bishop. And now they have this weak pawn, we have the knight coming to e4 and d6, we have the bishop coming, we have the castles coming, we have the castles coming. That sounds like a story. The castles are coming. Let's say the move knight h6 comes, we can even take, and now we can even castle the king or play rook f1, attack this pawn, and this position is dead for black. This is absolute nightmare, and we're already +3 in this position. Here typically they play the move bishop to c5, and this move is actually pretty good. Now if you don't know what you're doing here, you could lose pretty quickly, but we play the move knight c3, because we know what we're doing. Now once they play the move queen b6, which is a pretty logical move, they aim to give us checks on this diagonal that we've weakened, but we don't panic. We play the move knight to a4. This is a very key move, don't forget it. And you might be thinking, what if they give us a check? We're not afraid. King e2, we play the bomb cloud, we don't care. Now after king e2, they play the move queen d4, keeping this contact between the bishop and the queen. We simply trade, bishop takes, and now we play the move f4. This f4 move will come up time and time again in this opening, and the point is, simply you have a very strong center. You're going to trade this bishop off, and actually it looks like the king is coming into the game, but it doesn't really matter since the queens are off the board, so our king is totally safe. The king can actually take this pawn, and we're simply up a pawn, and there's nothing wrong with this position. Now that's e5 pretty much done. After e5, the next move they can play is queen b6, and queen b6 we respond the same way. We respond to most moves with the move knight c3, and what's the point? So now if they play e6, that will transpose later on to another opening, but here we play the move a3. Now a3 does two things. First of all, it stops bishop b4, which in some cases can become a threat. And second of all, we really want to develop the bishop to e3, but we're worried about them taking on b2. And actually now, if let's say they play a move like knight f6, here we always push the pawn in, So every time the knight comes to f6, you play e5. e5, you take space. Once they play knight back to d7, you play f4. Same theme. So this is why I really like this opening. A lot of the themes interlock. So they'll play a move like c5, and simply here you can play knight f3. If they take, we just take back with the queen, and this is actually a French defense. But it's a French defense where they haven't got the knight to c6 and they've played queen b6 early, so this is actually a pretty bad French for them. And there's a saying in the French defense, if you get a French player to a queenless game when this bishop is locked in on c8, it's a terrible position for them. We simply play g3, we just develop our pieces as normal, and this game isn't going anywhere for the opponent. Castle the king, this bishop is stuck, and actually in the end it becomes a liability, and this is simply just better for the white pieces. Now okay, let's say they don't play knight f6, they play knight d7. Well, now we play bishop e3, and the point still remains. If they play king takes b2, knight a4, traps the queen, and you're already winning. Now, if they play e5 again, this transposes into the other line, so I'm not going to talk about it. And the other move they can play is d takes e4. Here we have a really nice move. We don't have to recapture straight away. The move I like to play here is bishop to c4. What's the point? What if they just take a free pawn? Well, it's already plus 1.4 for white. So this is how bad it can get that quickly. So now we play knight f3, and already they're pretty much at a crossroads. If they play a move like e6, we simply castle, knight f6, standard development. Here I like to play king h1, and the point is you put your king proactively into safety, so this pin will never affect you. Knight d7 normally comes, and here already knight e5, and they're in a lot of trouble. Bishop e7 is a good move, but already we can play knight takes f7. And after king takes f7, queen h5 check. And if g6, we play queen h3. Now we're down a piece, we've sacrificed a piece, but this is hanging. The bishop's coming to g5 and the knight's coming to e4. So just a sample line, let's say h6. We can also play bishop f4. We don't even have to worry because they have so little moves. Like these two pieces are not even playing in the game. Let's say some random move, let's say rook a7, rook e1. Let's say they play a move like knight f8. Now already bishop e5 is winning. You're just simply winning the knight. They don't have enough resources to defend the position because all their resources are chilling. Swiftly moving on to the move g6. This move, nothing special, knight c3. They play a move like bishop g7. Here we play our special move, which is e5. We don't have to wait for the knight in this case because the bishop now is just biting on granite and it can't do much. We play the move f4 after f6, and we simply develop our pieces. After bishop g4, now we simply play bishop e2, unpinning the piece, and after castle we castle, and here we just have a good space advantage. So g6 is not really our concern. Let's get to the main moves now. D takes e4. D takes e4, we simply take back. And here, I discussed this in the short as well. After e5, we play knight f3. If they take the pawn straight away, this is an inaccuracy, we can play bishop c4, and already this is really bad for them. They have a really tough time defending this position. If they play knight f6, we can already castle, and we're already threatening knight g5 and e5. So let's say bishop e7, now knight g5. We're attacking this, but can't they castle the king? Well, not exactly. We play knight f7, rook f7, bishop f7, king f7, and the move e5, and you win the piece back, and you're much better. So let's say they play knight f6, castles. They have to play a move like knight bd7, but after that, we simply play queen e1. And the point of queen e1 is just to get the queen into the game via g3 and defend our pawn. Now, knight g5 is not great here on account of knight e5, where it hits the bishop and it defends the pawn. That's why we don't play knight g5. We just play queen e1. We very simply build our position up. Here, if they play bishop e7 wrongly, we play the move e5. If they go knight d5 here, queen g3 is quite strong. We're attacking this. If they castle, it's really bad. We have bishop a6. If they have to go g6, we take the rook even. And the engine's actually saying you don't even have to take the rook. Knight bd2. Knight d2, if they move the rook, even, e6. And this is crushing, absolutely crushing. So typically they play the move bishop to g4. And after bishop g4, we have two options. Either we can play c3, which is quite a good move, or we can play the bit more tricky option, which is bishop c4. Bishop c4, what's the point? Well, if they take us, this is a tactic you guys should all see. It's bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight e5 check, king goes back, and we simply grab this bishop. And here we have a much better position. It's already +3. This is how a simple line of how it could go. And yeah, we win the rook as well. And this isn't the only way they can go wrong. They can even play the move knight f6, and this is again a blunder. Bishop f7, king f7, and knight e5 picks up the bishop. So they can't do that. The only move they have to stay in the game is this move knight d7. Here we play it very simple. We play the move castle. They develop the knight, we play c3. Now it might look like this pawn is hanging. Now if they take it, it's actually a blunder because we'll take on f7, king takes, and take this pawn, this is checked, this will be won, and the game will be won. After c3, they typically develop the bishop, and now we develop our bishop. Now the knight is pinned, so it can't take the pawn. They typically castle, we bring the knight in, and just look at this development. Both knights out, both bishops out, strong center, the queen will come to e1 and g3. And typically a plan goes like bring the bishop to d3 and bringing the knight to c4 to put further emphasis on this bishop on d6 and this pawn on e5. So those are the typical plans in this opening. So queen e1, bring the bishop back, queen comes to h4 or g3, rook comes to e1, and you have a great position out of the opening. Now moving on to our final variation. The variation is e6. Now we play the move knight c3, and what are the points? Now they have three main moves. Let's cover bishop b4 first. After bishop b4, we simply play bishop d2, unpinning ourselves, and typically they take. Now all we have to do is take on e4, and there's nothing special here. Here if they take us on d2, we take back with the queen, and here we have a simple plan. We want a long castle, play c3, play g4, h4, and attack them on the king side. So this is a sample of how the game could go. And already this is looking really good for us. Already white is better. So if they don't take and play a move like knight e7, we just play a3, making them commit to either taking the knight or going back. If they take, we're super happy with the bishop pair, the great pawn structure, the center, and we have a good position. But if they retreat with the bishop, now all we have to do is bring our bishop to d3. Let's say they castle. Now we play the move e5, which is quite nice actually. Typically you don't play it without any reasoning, but here we open up the bishop. So here we're going to get an attack on knight d7, f4. Just remember, f4 and knight f3 is a very common plan to play f4 and then bring the knight out. Castle and your position is simply very good. But what if they play the move queen b6 here? Well, this is the third most popular move in this position, but we play it the same way as we did with queen b6 played the move before. We play a3, and this is the exact same position we had, so we don't need to discuss this any further. So the final move they can play is knight f6, and this is quite funny. We play the move e5, and actually if you know what this opening is, it is actually the French defense. So we've used the psychology of chess to trick our Caro-Kann playing opponent into a French defense which they don't want to play at all, and now you'll be prepared in this line as well. So simply, we don't want to play the main line of the French. I recommend this move. It's more uncommon. Actually, Gukesh played it in the World Championship final. Knight ce2. What's the point? You want to play c3 and bolster this center. Bring the knight to f3, and I'll just show you a few moves. Bishop e7, knight comes to f3, castles, bishop e3, and you have a really, really nice position here. You can play g3, let's say queen b6. You just go queen b3, and you have a really, really nice center. That essentially covers the entire fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann. So now you have a weapon, and you will be able to win your Caro-Kann games with style. And if you want the full 1 hour breakdown, I did on my other channel, where I went through the lines in a bit more detail if you're keen for that. If you're not, it's fine, we all have lives. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe. If you liked it, like it. If you comment it, comment it.